Sit with me for a while. I want to speak to you the way I would in a quiet room. No performance, no judgment, just the work that matters. You asked how to know when your shadow is no longer content to live in the basement and has started driving the car. That question already shows courage. It means you've noticed yourself saying things you didn't plan to say, choosing what you swore you'd never choose again, and watching the same scene repeat in different rooms with different people. Jung called the shadow the constellation of rejected traits and impulses, the parts of you you learned were unsafe to show. It is not the enemy of your life, it is the exiled life inside you. And when it is not welcomed home, it will run the house from behind the walls. Let me lay a simple path. We'll move through 5 recognitions: repetition, disproportion, projection, performance, and abdication. I will speak like a clinician, but also like a man who has sat with men in their hardest hours. You do not need to become someone else. You need to become whole. 1. Repetition. The same lesson in new clothes. At first, it seems like misfortune. Different job, different city, different partners, same ending. You felt hopeful, then familiar dread, then the old script, disappointment, resentment, withdrawal. You tell yourself, I chose differently this time, yet somehow you're back where you started. That isn't a curse. It's architecture. The psyche rebuilds the same corridor until you recognize the door you've always refused to open. The shadow doesn't punish you. It recreates the moment of decision, so you can finally choose with consciousness rather than reflex. A man who was shamed for having needs will keep choosing people who cannot meet needs. He will call this bad luck, but the repetition is a compass pointing to the place he will not stand and say, this is what I require. A man who learned that anger loses love will choose situations where he must either swallow anger or risk abandonment. He will call this unfair, but the geometry is exact. The psyche keeps presenting the scene he avoided practicing. Repetition is not random. It is the soul's insistence on completion. Until you allow the old scene to be lived through with the spine you did not have at the time, the stage hands will reset it. New actors, same lines, same lesson waiting. If you want to know whether your shadow is in charge, listen for sentences that begin with always and never. Always this kind of boss, never the right partner, always unrecognized, never chosen. These absolutes reveal an unconscious author. Consciousness speaks in specifics. The shadow speaks in eternities. The truth is quieter. This is the lesson I keep meeting. Once you say that, the repetition stops feeling like fate and starts feeling like a doorway. And doorways are for men who have decided to walk. 2. Disproportion. Heat that exceeds the moment. A small slight lands like a knife. You hear a tone in someone's voice and your body floods. Your partner asks for space and you feel abandoned, not for an hour, but as if you've been left alone on a train platform at dusk. When the emotion outweighs the event, the shadow has taken the microphone. Disproportion is the signature of the past in the present. It isn't merely being too sensitive. It is being precisely sensitive to a wound that was never permitted to speak at the time. The stoic man will say, it's nothing. The explosive man will make it everything. Both are controlled, one by refusal, the other by overflow. The controlled man is not the one who never feels. He is the one who recognizes, this reaction is older than this room. Notice how disproportion breeds stories. They don't respect me. No one ever chooses me. I'm done with people. These are not facts. They are the shadow assembling a jury and testifying as the only witness. what is proportionate, a response that matches what actually happened, not less, not more. It feels clean, like cool water on a hot face. You say what is true, not what the past demands. When proportion returns, the shadow loosens its grip. You can feel the difference on your tongue. Bitterness dries up and clarity remains. The man controlled by his shadow cannot feel proportion. The man who is learning to integrate can. He knows the difference between a spark and a wildfire, between an old dream and the person standing in front of him now. He becomes trustworthy because his presence belongs to the moment, not the past. 3. Projection, the mirror you want to break. The psyche has a quiet trick. Whatever you refuse to acknowledge in yourself, it will place on a screen outside you. Then it will seat you in front row, arms crossed, and make you watch. You'll despise arrogance because you have ambition you never claimed. You'll call others weak because tenderness terrifies you. You'll resent controlling people because you hunger for authority and have no clean relationship to it. Projection is not lying about others. It's misplacing what is yours. Sometimes the trait is actually there, but your intensity tells the truth. I am reacting to myself. That is why certain people feel radioactive. They are not just themselves anymore. They're you wearing their face. A man in shadow will swear he sees clearly. He doesn't. He sees with surgical precision everything but himself. He thinks he is diagnosing the world, not realizing he is reading his own chart out loud. There is a reason contempt feels intoxicating. It relieves you from the ache of examining your own unlived life. It binds you to moral superiority, which is the cheapest high a man can buy. It separates you from brothers, lovers, colleagues, and from the parts of you that could have become strong if only you had admitted they existed. How do you recognize projection without turning this into a technique? You notice the rise, you notice the speed, you notice the enjoyment, and then the hangover. And you tell yourself a simple, unglamorous sentence. Some of what I hate lives here too. That sentence is not defeat. It is the first honest step toward sovereignty. When projection softens, relationships change. People stop looking like enemies and start looking like mirrors, useful, uncomfortable, and finally liberating. The man who becomes curious about his own reflection becomes impossible to manipulate. He is no longer driven by denial. He is driven by truth. 4. Performance, the mask that won't come off. When the shadow runs the show, authenticity feels like risk. Better to perform, better to show the curated man, competent, agreeable, admired, useful. You will be praised for this mask. You may be promoted for it. Many men build entire lives around a persona they mistake for a self. Jung warned that the persona is necessary but deadly if you marry it. Why? Because admiration is not love. Applause is not intimacy. You can succeed while starving. A man who lives to be seen will begin to organize his choices around optics. What earns points? What avoids conflict? What keeps the tribe comfortable? He will call this being wise, but inside there is a quiet bargain. If I shine in the right way, maybe I won't be left. This is not adulthood. It is a boyhood contract masquerading as virtue. How do you know performance is running you? You sense the hollowness after triumph. You notice you are careful where you used to be alive. You cannot feel your yes or your no without calculating the audience. Compliments land. but nothing touches you. The shadow loves performance because it keeps you away from the one person whose approval actually matters, your own. As long as the mask stays on, the exiled parts of you stay exiled. The tenderness you hid, the fury you never aimed cleanly, the grief you postponed, the particular shape of your gift, muted in exchange for acceptance. A man stepping out of performance does not become reckless or loud. He becomes accurate. He speaks a little less. What he says has weight. He turns toward conversations he used to avoid. He is not cruel, but he is not available for the smallness that applause requires. He stops auditioning in rooms where his soul is not needed. You can tell he is free by the way silence sits on him. He does not hurry to fill it. He does not panic in it. He has begun to belong to himself. 5. Abdication, blaming fate for what you keep choosing. The final sign is the quietest and the most devastating. You narrate your life as if you didn't write it. Everything happens to you. Chaos arrives uninvited. Betrayal hunts you down. Bad timing explains everything. The shadow is a brilliant dramatist. It arranges the stage so your old beliefs look confirmed. If you are sure you will be abandoned, you'll ignore red flags, collapse boundaries, and then call the ending inevitable. If you believe people cannot be trusted, you'll choose the unreliable, and when they fail, you'll say, "See?" If you are convinced you must do everything yourself, you won't ask for help, and then you'll resent the world for letting you drown. This is abdication, giving your agency to the story you fear. It feels safe because responsibility is heavy and self-honesty hurts before it heals. But without responsibility, there can be no respect, not from others and not from yourself. A man under abdication is full of reasons and empty of choices. A man stepping out of it becomes painfully simple. He stops explaining. He starts owning. Not with theatrical vows, not with public declarations, but with a reorientation that can be heard in the way he speaks about his life. The pronouns change. They made me becomes I chose. It always happens becomes I allowed it. He doesn't hate himself for this. He recognizes the design, and he reclaims authorship. The shadow does not vanish when you take responsibility. It drops the puppet strings because it no longer needs to yank your hand to move the world. You are moving it on purpose now. The boy, the armor, and the man who arrives. Beneath all 5 signs lies the same architecture. A boy who learned to survive by splitting off what was true, and a man who keeps the boy's contracts long after they have expired. Repetition is the boy hoping to finally get a different ending. Disproportion is the boy finally being heard through an adult's mouth. Projection is the boy pointing at the world so he won't be examined. Performance is the boy trading honesty for safety. Abdication is the boy waiting for rescue. What then is the man? Not a hero, not a statue. The man is the adult who arrives and stays. He does not shame the boy or worship him. He listens and decides. He lets grief run through the system without turning it into spectacle. He permits anger to inform boundaries without turning it into punishment. He lets longing teach him where life is asking to be built. This is the beginning of integration, not the erasure of shadow, but the end of its illegitimate rule. The exiled parts are allowed home, not to dominate the house, but to have a room in it. The man becomes coherent. That coherence is not loud. It is weight, felt by anyone who stands near him. Masculine structure, king, warrior, magician, lover. Jung's archetypal language remains useful, not as mythology to cosplay, but as maps for the inner city. When repetition breaks, the warrior stops fighting phantoms and begins to defend what is here. When proportion returns, the lover can feel deeply without drowning. When projection softens, the magician sees reality cleanly and speaks from insight, not performance. When abdication ends, the king emerges, not as a tyrant grasping for control, but as order and blessing. This is allowed, this is not. This is ours to build, this is ours to release. The integrated king is not sentimental, he is just. He does not outsource authority to moods, crowds, or childhood contracts. He confers value and holds line. His presence settles rooms because his inner court is not at war with itself. Leadership, love, and the quiet test. What happens in a man's life when the shadow is no longer at the wheel? Leadership changes first. Decisions are cleaner. Meetings have fewer words and more reality. You no longer need enemies to feel strong. Respect arrives without demand because steadiness signals safety. You will tell the truth even when it costs you. You will not humiliate to win. You will not abandon when it storms. Love deepens, not by becoming dramatic, but by becoming honest. You stop performing for admiration and start speaking for connection. You listen to learn, not to load a counter-argument. You don't call detachment strength. You know what tenderness costs, and you pay it because love without tenderness is management, not union. And your own life, your private, unphotographed life, stops feeling like something you endure between highlights. The hours become inhabitable. You can be alone without shrinking, with people without disappearing, in conflict without breaking, in joy without apologizing for it. The nervous system unclenches. The house is in order, not perfect, but governed. That is the quiet test of masculine maturity, not the absence of darkness, but the ability to hold it without letting it leak onto those you love. Responsibility and witness. You will still face crucial turns alone. That is how initiations work. But you do not have to be isolated. Men heal in the presence of men who do not flinch. Brotherhood is not a performance of strength. It is a place where truth does not have to shout to be heard. It matters who stands near you when the old scene tries to restart. It matters who hears your unclean truth and does not withdraw. It matters who refuses to turn your confession into a contest. A man who has witnesses does not need to rehearse his greatness. He remembers his center and proceeds. The paradox remains: solitude for decisions, brotherhood for endurance, both, not one. What you owe. You do not owe the world a mask that pacifies it. You owe the world a self that is coherent, disciplined, warm, and strong. You owe the people you love the steadiness of proportion. You owe your work the accuracy of a clean perception. You owe the boy you once were a man who will not abandon him again. And you owe the exiled parts, anger, grief, desire, tenderness, power, a place at the table, not to run your life, but to be heard so they no longer need to hijack it. Closing, so 5 signs you're being controlled by your shadow. The same lesson repeating with new actors. Emotion that outweighs the moment. Hatred that functions as a mirror. A life arranged around appearance instead of truth. And the story that everything happens to you while you quietly keep choosing it. None of this is a verdict, it's a map. You are not asked to destroy your shadow. You are invited to recognize it. To let it stand beside you rather than behind you. To let it give you back the heat you exiled and the gold you refused to claim. If you listen closely, you can hear the shift. The sentences change. The posture changes. The room inside you opens, and there is a chair for each part that returns from exile. A house in order, a man at home. Be that man, not perfectly, reliably. Begin.